बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। तो हम शुरू करते हैं, मोहसिना इंट्रोड्यूस करवाएंगी।
Thank you. Good afternoon. Today we're pleased to have Dr. Waqar Ahmed with us here today. Dr. Waqar Ahmed is a PhD from the National University of Ireland and is currently serving as the Joint Executive Director at the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. He is also the author of the book Pakistan's Agenda for Economic Reforms. He has published extensively in areas such as inclusive growth and infrastructure reforms, trade and taxation policies, trade and services, youth employment, women-led social enterprises, and social safety nets. He is also a visiting faculty member and researcher at University of Le Havre in France, National University of Ireland, IMT Institute of Advanced Studies in Italy, Pakistan Institute of Trade and Development, and Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. He has worked also on South Asia on trade-related issues, in Africa on evaluation of improved food technology, in the United States on the International Monetary Fund Fellowship Program, in the European Union on welfare impacts of trade reforms, and in Far East Asia on assignments related to South-South exchange and learning. He serves as a member on several boards, committees, and working groups, and it is with great pleasure that we welcome him here today. And without further ado, we would hand over the floor to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ji, for this very gracious introduction. It's good to be amongst friends and, if I can say, family, of course. I was just telling a couple of people, Ji, just to switch briefly into Urdu, कि इस कमरे में बहुत सारी जो है ना वो डांटें पिटी हुई हैं, तो वो जब भी इस कमरे में एंटर होते हैं तो वो और ज़ाहिर है उस्तादों का अगर नाम भी ले लिया जाए तो अच्छा होता है, तो इस कमरे में जब एंटर होते हैं तो अशरफ याद साहब की डांट याद आ जाती है। तो इसलिए दिस इज़ वेयर वी लर्नड एवरीथिंग, दिस इज़ वेयर वी सॉर्ट ऑफ अच्छा जी। सो just to very briefly take you through this, because I would like this to be sort of an open dialogue, a more interactive discussion. I just have one slide on where does the economy stand today, and then straight to the topic, that the need for post-18th Amendment institutional reform. It's a little late to talk about post-18th Amendment institutional reform, especially given that we are 6 years down the line, but still, there is an unfinished agenda which I want to talk about. Third, what guidance does the Constitution provide on this reform? And it's very seldom that we go back and read through that Constitution, what it is saying. And then, of course, I want to discuss about, as I said, my own institution, of course, which is planning and planning function, and how have planning functions evolved in the world where devolutions have taken place, you know. And how can we sort of invite all of you to sort of rethink on new planning models, the way they are being sort of practiced across the world in a very devolved structure. So just a simple slide, where does the economy stand? I think the economy of pre and post 18th Amendment is very easy to compare now, given the stronger foundations that it has. CPEC, of course, has given a new narrative to Pakistan economy. We have passed 5% growth rate, you know, which is a significant achievement. We have more diversified sources of growth in the system. While, yes, the cost of energy has increased, but still the energy outlook looks positive going forward, which is a plus for our supply side capacity. We, of course, are seeing increased debt levels in the country, but of course, these increased debt levels have come about at a time when economy's credit worthiness has also increased. And you are fairly convenient in picking up productive debt as and when required for balance of payment support. So this is an economy which is fairly different from where we were standing in 2009-10, when we were going into discussing the 18th Amendment, you know. But despite this progress, there are three things that continue to sort of undermine the sustainability aspect, you know. So what we say is that while, yes, macroeconomic stability has been achieved, but macroeconomic sustainability, the sustainability of those indicators is still something that we need to pursue. First, our global competitiveness rankings are still under pressure, you know. In fact, we have dipped this year. Private sector is concerned about rising cost of doing business. So while yes, we want reforms, but we don't want reforms in a manner that increase the cost of doing business. And then you have consumer groups who also talk about markets and are fairly concerned about the increased cartelization of our both markets, goods as well as the labor market, as we call them, you know. So वो जितनी भी ग्रोथ आई है उसके बावजूद ये एक एंट्री पॉइंट्स हैं जहाँ पे आपको इस वक्त रिफॉर्म की ज़रूरत है अगर इस ग्रोथ को अब सस्टेन रखना है। और ऐसा नहीं है कि ये ग्रोथ पहली दफ़ा आई है पाकिस्तान की इकॉनमी में, माजी में भी ये अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ जो हैं वो हमारे पास रही हैं। सो वन ऑफ द पॉसिबल रीज़न्स कि ये तीनों मुश्किलात इस वक्त competitiveness की हमें आ रही हैं, or this is an hypothesis that I sort of developed in this book which was recently published, कि economic policy coordination जो है that has become a little more complex after 18th Amendment, which is not a bad thing. We are not saying that that 18th Amendment or the institutions which have been formed to implement 18th Amendment are essentially bad. Not at all. We are not referring that. Complexity has increased, of course, and we need to understand that after the 18th Amendment, there are more number of institutions, there are more laws and regulations. And if you go back and read the evening's memo when our parliament had passed the 18th Amendment, a deadline of December 2015 had been given to finalize all the laws and all the regulations which will be responsible for implementation of 18th Amendment. So the key argument of this slide is that those laws and those regulations which were supposed to be finalized by December 2015 have not been finalized, due to which there is a lot of confusion, ambiguity, not just at the federal level, but amongst the provinces as well, regarding several socio-economic affairs, which I'll talk about. So there's a need to expedite the post-18th Amendment legislative reform in order to demonstrate the governance, improved governance outcomes and improved outcomes of for economy. And just to sort of demonstrate what do I mean by actual demonstration and when can we actually say that yes, things have improved, one doesn't need to look too far, you know. This is a sample of largely emerging market economies, you know, and not all of them release data on a single benchmark year. So you have to go back and the data sort of harmonizes somewhere around 2014, and that's where the WGI indicators give a comparable data, you know. So while yes, we are talking about institutional reform of social sectors, which is sort of the outcome of 18th Amendment, these indicators have to improve ultimately. If one has to say that yes, post 18th Amendment socio-economic outcomes are improving, you need to demonstrate that yes, Pakistan moves from the last one over there to certainly beyond Nigeria or Ukraine or other countries, you know. And of course, control of corruption, government effectiveness, regulatory quality, these are of course outcome indicators of what goes into the 18th Amendment. And then if, for example, Pakistan is to be compared not with other countries, but with its own self, then this is the time series of Pakistan, you know. Only except voice and accountability, there hasn't been marked improvement. We are going towards improvement, but improvements have been incremental in governance indicators if we compare with our own self, you know. And certainly I think this gives a reason for people to basically question the entire devolution process. And now not just the 18th Amendment, people also question the 7th NFC or the post 7th NFC award thinking as well, you know, that what needs to be done. So except for voice and accountability, there hasn't been marked changes in the way we see our governance indicators. In fact, regulatory burden has been really increasing in these past 3 or 4 years. Government effectiveness, for example, the way it is defined by WGI, there isn't a big dent in improvements towards government effectiveness. So what are the bases of competitiveness going forward, you know? So what we present in the book is a detailed review of 4 institutions, and we certainly do not take an economy-wide approach or a government-wide approach. We cannot do that in a single book. We have sort of taken a deep dive into 4 institutions, which is the Finance Ministry, the Planning Ministry, Commerce Ministry, and FBR. Just to summarize, because we don't have much time, there are 3 common problems across the economic ministries at the federal level, you know. First is the HR issue. You require such specialized human resource to work in these economic ministries, and unfortunately, as per the rules of business, as we call them in the government, leaving the HR function to another ministry, which would be establishment division or any other ministry, is something which, I mean, good countries don't function that way, you know. We want to move towards good models. So the HR function of these ministries needs to be reviewed. How can they house, retain better human resources? Second, these ministries, all of them, in one way or the other, have certain accounting functions, certain disbursement functions, you know, and the ability to minimize wastage and leakage in spending has in fact eroded. And Dr. Hafiz Pasha has come up with a later book, in fact, where he has shown the extent of that wastage, increase in that wastage, you know. And third is the need to shed non-essential tasks, you know. Many of the ministries are carrying the burden of those attached departments which were attached in, let's say, 50s or 60s. Without naming one of the ministry, एक ministry इस list में से ऐसी है जो बीमा भी issue करती है जी, right? So वो life insurance भी issue करती है. So अब आप मेरे से ये पूछेंगे कि उस ministry का क्या काम है to issue life insurance, for example. But वो issue कर रहे हैं, वो deal कर रहे हैं. So what we want to arrive is, and I'll just explain the slide in a while, कि while ये जो 4 institutions हैं, while these 4 institutions land over here in the Venn diagram, these institutions are also not talking, not because they don't want to talk, but because system इस तरह का complex हो गया है, they are unable to talk to regulatory bodies, which are very important, accountability institutions, which are very important, and provincial economic departments, जो कि उनके natural counterparts हैं. तो ऐसा क्या हुआ है कि Venn diagram में जो 4 चीज़ें आइन कहता है, I'll just show you the constitution, आइन कहता है कि इनको 4 को NEC के अंडर काम करना है इस तरीके से, वो कैसे disconnect हो गए, right? So 2 questions here. What does the constitution say? Going back to 101, going back to basics. And number 2, how can we go back to what the Constitution desires? So I have 4 articles here, Ji. Number 1, Article 38. The state has responsibility to promote socio-economic well-being. इस article को हमने जो interpret किया है, वो social safety net, social protection और BISP. That's how we have interpreted it, as if it is Benazir Income Support Program. It's not just BISP. It's much bigger than BISP, you know. And I'm sure Sartaj Saab will give us the kind of more broad-based. I was in one of his presentations where he was saying that government's responsibility to design rules and policies which promote entrepreneurship, which attract domestic and foreign investment, is extremely important, you know. For example, when was the last time that state itself did an incidence analysis of whether monetary and fiscal policies are pro-welfare? When was the last time that we did this? In order to sort of assess if we are complying with Article 38. Second, Article 73 provides procedures with respect to money bill. Now, Zafrul Hassan Saab is here, Naveed Saab is here. Both of them will, of course, correct me. No changes in taxation-related SRO should take place without parliamentary debate, right? And it should go to the Standing Committee. This is what Article 73's interpretation in National Assembly, which is there. Anybody can look at those interpretation documents, says, you know. But the way we do it is, we take it to a forum called ECC. And we would change any taxes, any regulatory duty, you know. Hata bhi denge, laga bhi denge, right? So again, a violation of the article. Third, Article 74 provides rules for expenditure. And Article 84 talks about supplementary and excess grants. Ab yahan pe bhi we have withdrawn a lot of the powers of the parliament. That debate, the entire reason that it should be debated isn't there. And if you look at the past 2 years, that how much of the supplementary and excess grants by MOF was, let's say, debated in the parliament, then I in fact had to call MNA Kaisar Sheikh Saab, who's the chairman of NA's finance committee, and ask him, he said it never came to me. You see? So that disconnect, is really there. Now, let me come to what are the implications for NEC, and more importantly, what are the implications for planning function. I'm not calling it planning commission. I'm calling it planning function, because I take planning as a whole ecosystem where you have Ministry of Planning, Development and Reforms, then you have the 5 different planning departments in the provinces. Now, this is the overall planning function. So, if you look at Article 156.2, it talks about NEC to review the overall economic condition, provide guidance on plans with respect to financial, commercial, social, and economic policies. This is what NEC is meant to do. But if you compare this with, for example, Article 154.1, which is after the 18th Amendment, there is a council which has been suggested. And that council is now responsible to regulate the policies. So this is my key argument number 2, that council which has been formed in the 18th Amendment and NEC which is there, there's a conflict between job description basically. And there are 2 interpretations. Interpretation 1, NEC has the mandate to formulate plans for advising the governments, including the provinces, and this is how we have been doing. But the issue is that you also have something called, as I said, Council of Common Interest. So the second interpretation is that Council of Common Interest cannot perform its duties unless it has supervisory control over National Economic Council. And people like Mr. Raza Rabbani and others who have been architects of 18th Amendment, they have a consensus that NEC will be subordinate to CCI. Right? This is not, once the consensus is there, somebody has to implement it. Somebody has to make the laws to implement that consensus, So that law is still not there, Now, this is how it looks like. The federal economic governance, this is how it is currently looking like. You have clubbed everything under CCI, and maybe I need to be corrected over here. Somebody can guide me how many CCI meetings actually took place last year, And whenever they take place, they would have much more important agenda items than deciding about laws and regulations for economic planning or economic development. And that priority really goes in depth. Friends from Pakistan Statistics Bureau were telling me, that they have 2 agenda items lined up for CCI, but there isn't time for CCI to pick up so many things, Then, if this is the model, and it is a good democratic model, how do you strengthen this office over here, And of course, unless this happens, the fragmentation in the system will continue because at the moment, all the institutions which are clubbed at the federal and provincial level, all rely on CCI. Everything gets dumped over here in CCI, and never gets discussed. That's why after 6 or 7 years, you still don't have those laws and regulations that should govern the 18th Amendment. And this matter of fragmentation becomes more complex because we don't have guidance on how to consolidate the public accountability institutions. पहला वाला था economic governance, दूसरा है economic accountability. Even the economic accountability institutions are working in a very fragmented manner, and there are no laws and guidance to pull it together, And for the third chart, economic governance, accountability, and the third one is regulation. So for the regulatory arrangement, I don't even have the top box, basically. I don't know what to put over here.
Currently, it's CCI.
Currently, it's CCI, of course. If it is CCI currently, to pull together this entire regulatory system that Pakistan has, which is very good, it is extremely good, better than so many countries in the world. But who's pulling it all together? And this is why Competition Commission of Pakistan comes back to you that we have issues with the Supreme Court. SECP comes back to you and says we have issues with Flana Regulatory Authority. NEPRA and OGRA have issues with the Line Ministry because nobody is sort of pulling together the overall ecosystem of the regulatory bodies, So what is happening is the pie chart gets broken, right? The three segments which had to work together to implement the post-18th Amendment economic policy, they have a disconnect. The Executive Office, Accountability Institution, and regulatory bodies. Now, what are the outcomes of this disconnect? We discuss 4 case studies in this book. The first outcome is a fragmented taxation structure. In the past 7 years, your tax revenue hasn't increased at the percentage at which number of taxes have increased. Every province now wants to impose its own taxes. So if you register a small and medium enterprise today, that SME faces 56 annual taxes, right? Number 2, your fragmented development spending leading to multiplicity of similar schemes. So the ideal case study that we give in, for example, one of the chapters is that एक ही काम के लिए कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग इंस्टीट्यूट खोला गया इस फॉर वोकेशन, जो फेडरल ने भी खोला है डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल पे और 3 सूबों ने भी खोल दिए. यानी फेडरल के पीएसडीपी में भी था और सूबाई एडीपीज में भी था, राइट? इवेंचुअली इट इज़ अ लॉस टू द टैक्स पेयर, बट वो कोऑर्डिनेशन चूँकि नहीं थी पीएसडीपीज और एडीपीज के बीच में, सो इट हैज़ लेड टू केस स्टडी नंबर 2 विच इज़ फ्रैगमेंटेड डेवलपमेंट स्पेंडिंग. केस स्टडी नंबर 3, आज ट्रेड पॉलिसी का कोई वाली वारिस नहीं रहा. Ministry of Commerce is struggling to find out how will I implement my trade policy, right? With so many functions sitting with Q Block, so many functions sitting with FBR, State Bank, there are voices to make TDAP autonomous. So Ministry of Commerce, there is a Ministry of Textile as well, by the way. So 60% of it is gone, And then you are making a 5-year trade policy. So that is our case study number 3. Our case study number 4 is, of course, the energy supply chain reform. What do you do with it? Now with CPEC, you have made great progress on the generation side of energy. You have added new units to your supply capacity, but the governance reform had to come on the distribution and transmission side. The governance reform had to come in technical losses, plugging theft, for example. It's not कि उस पे काम नहीं हुआ है, but it's a much more difficult job to do, And that is what we discuss in case study number 4. अगर सिर्फ हम इसको ले लें, क्योंकि इस वक्त 4 केस स्टडीज़ यहाँ पे डिस्कस नहीं हो सकती, मेरा इंटरेस्ट चूँकि यहाँ पे प्लानिंग कमीशन में हम प्रेजेंटेशन दे रहे हैं, तो मेरा इंटरेस्ट केस स्टडी नंबर 2 में था कि पीएसडीपी और एडीपी का निज़ाम जो है वो किस तरीके से फ्रैगमेंट हो गया और कितना मुश्किल है. ऐसा नहीं है कि बजट नहीं बढ़ा, बजट बड़ा है, देयर आर रिसोर्सेज एट हैंड, लेकिन उस बजट को नीचे तक पहुँचाना जो है वो इतना मुश्किल काम है. I spent days sitting in this P block trying to construct all this. Literally. मैं यहाँ पे अपने दोस्तों के साथ बैठा रहा हूँ अभी जब ये किताब से पहले जब हम इस पे काम कर रहे थे कि ये कौन किसको रिपोर्ट कर रहा है, and there wasn't a consensus. अभी भी there is no consensus जी कि कौन किसको यहाँ पे रिपोर्ट कर रहा है. फिर आप देखें कि जो प्रोविंशियल असेंबलीज हैं उनके नीचे जो सीएम सेक्रेटरीट आ रहा है, पीएफसी, प्रायोरिटाइजेशन रिव्यू कमेटीज़ प्रोविंसेस में, फिर एडीपी फॉर्मुलेशन, उसके नीचे हर सूबे में एक डिफरेंट निज़ाम है. सो दिस डायग्राम इज़ नॉट कंप्लीट. एवरी प्रोविंस हैज़ अ डिफरेंट सिस्टम व्हेन इट कम्स टू इम्प्लीमेंटिंग एडीपी ऑन ग्राउंड, and this is where, of course, Ali Kamal Saab is here, so our Guruji, Dr. Hafiz Pasha comes in, and his study of 2015 that every 100 rupees that is released by the consolidated development expenditure, 38 rupees are not reaching the beneficiary. We are not blaming the corruption. We are just saying there is a wastage in the system, right? Because we have sort of बहुत बड़ा कर लिया हमने निज़ाम जो है. Now, what can be, I just want to leave you with the last 2 or 3 slides, What can be a new role for planning function, What I give in the book is basically 3 case studies. And countries keep on reforming their planning systems, and we also need to think in new directions. All these 3 countries had a planning commission similar to ours. Malaysia, in fact, took the same consultancy, took the same model, which was there in the 1960s, you know. But today, Malaysia has a very different model, where they have a National Planning Council and its secretariat placed with the cabinet division, right? It makes their reporting work more easier. And given that they have a provincial representation in the cabinet as well, so follow-up is easier. India abolished the planning commission, a much more difficult country to handle, you know. But they made an even more powerful thing by taking Niti Aayog at the Prime Minister's Secretariat. Niti Aayog is National Institution for Transforming India, you know. And at the Niti Aayog, you have one council head equal to member planning commission from each of the states of India. Each of the states of India. We used to have this model where member planning commission in Islamabad was appointed through provincial representation. Right? Punjab had a member in 80s. KP had a member. Indonesia is now bottom-up spatial model. You have over 13,000 islands. How do you do central planning? You know, you cannot have it. So everyone has to have their own district plan, which is then framed at the Prime Minister's Secretariat. So it's a very fascinating study how have planning systems evolved in other countries, which probably we need to do at a national level. G. We have 3 options now. Either we can continue business as usual, or वही fragmented system रहे PSDP or ADPs का. Number 2, and this is, option number 2 is where I think we need to invite Dr. Parvez Tahir. This is where Parvez Tahir Saab has done the most work. And his key recommendation of that work is that planning commission will become more powerful if you house it now with CCI. You see, Prime Minister ने तो अब आना नहीं ना, Prime Minister head of commission है, आइन के मुताबिक. Prime Minister को टाइम नहीं है, right? CCI कह रही है मेरी capacity नहीं है. तो CCI को आप capacity दें. That is Dr. Parvez Tahir's basically idea. Option number 3 is something on which, as I was citing, Pasha Sahab, Javed Jabbar Sahab, to some extent Shahid Kardar Sahab as well, if I can add the name, they have been talking about it. कि जिस वक्त विजन 2025 बना है उस वक्त भी उनकी यही सिफारिश थी, 11th 5-year plan बना है उस वक्त भी उनकी यही सिफारिश थी कि हम क्यों ना सूबों को अपने अपने 5-year plan बनाने दें और सूबे वो प्लान सबमिट कराएं CCI में और प्लानिंग कमीशन उन प्लान्स को पकड़े और फिर जो 18th amendment में प्लानिंग कमीशन का रोल है टू कोऑर्डिनेट द प्लान्स वो रोल प्लानिंग कमीशन करे. So these are the 3 options going forward, and I think all 3 of them should be open for debate. Ji. Just one footnote over here कि सिर्फ प्लानिंग फंक्शन रिफॉर्म करने से मामलात हल नहीं होंगे. एज आई शोड, अकाउंटेबिलिटी रिजीम जो है वो भी प्लानिंग सिस्टम के अराउंड आपको रिजॉल्व करनी है. हमने जो पुराने लोग बैठे हैं, हमने आपको याद होगा कि फ़िज़िकल M&D स्टार्ट की थी प्लानिंग कमीशन में, जहाँ पे फ़िज़िकली देयर वाज अ सिस्टम जो ADB के साथ बनाया था, फ़िज़िकल M&D का, मॉनिटरिंग एंड एवेल्यूएशन का. ठीक है, उस सिस्टम में हो सकता है खामियां हों, बट जब तक वो M&D का सिस्टम आपके डेवलपमेंट बजट को कॉम्प्लीमेंट नहीं करता तब तक वो 100 में से 38 रुपए कहीं ना कहीं खोते रहेंगे. और ऑफ कोर्स ये जो अकाउंटेबिलिटी की फ्रैगमेंटेशन है, वी विल स्टिल कंटिन्यू टू फेस दिस. क्योंकि इस वक्त अगर आप देखें ना कि इस वक्त अगर PSDP उस तरीके से नहीं खर्च हो रहा जिस तरह हम चाहते हैं, तो कोई ना कोई कमेटी, कोई ना कोई इंक्वायरी हरकत में आ जाती है किसी ना किसी ऑफिस की. लेकिन उस ऑफिस को ये नहीं पता होता कि इसी मुद्दे के ऊपर दूसरे ऑफिस में इंक्वायरी चल रही है. सो वो डुप्लीकेशन होगी ना अकाउंटेबिलिटी लेयर्स की, जिसकी वजह से आपने एक प्रोजेक्ट डायरेक्टर का इनिशिएटिव ही किल कर दिया. वो कहता है फिर मैं स्पेंडिंग ही नहीं करता, राइट. सो प्लानिंग फंक्शन का रिफॉर्म जो है अकाउंटेबिलिटी के रिफॉर्म के साथ करना होगा. इट हैज़ टू बी अ कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री रिफॉर्म. माई लास्ट स्लाइड जी, एज आई सेड, आई स्टार्टेड ऑफ विद द इकोनॉमिक आउटलुक. आई स्टिल बिलीव कि आपकी डेवलपमेंट स्पेंडिंग में और आपकी इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ में इस वक्त CPEC ने जो جو مومنٹم کریٹ کیا ہے, آئی تھنک it is about time that as CPEC's early harvest projects come to an end, we should start thinking beyond CPEC now. This year, of course, most of the early harvest projects will come to an end, which is very good. Ultimately, یہ سارے منصوبے جو ہیں وہ انہوں نے ہمارے حوالے کر دینے ہیں. چائنا نے الٹیمیٹلی چلانے تو ہم نے ہیں نا, وہ بجلی گھر جو ہیں. سو وہ دو چیزیں ہیں. اگر وہ دوبارہ سے نظام وہی رہے گا امپلیمنٹیشن کا کہ ہم نے ابھی تک 18ویں ترمیم کے بعد وہ قوانین ہی فائنلائز نہیں کیے جو امپلیمنٹیشن کے ہیں, جو ڈیولپمنٹ اسپینڈنگ کے ہیں, تو پھر پرابلم وہی رہے گی. اینڈ دین آف کورس وی نیڈ ٹو موو ٹورڈ اسٹرکچرل ریفارمس دیٹ ریڈیوس دا کاسٹ آف ڈوئنگ بزنس, جن ریفارمس کو آف کورس میں اس لینتھ پہ یہاں پہ ڈسکس نہیں کر سکا جی. آف کورس آئی تھاٹ وی کوڈ ہیو اے مور اوپن ڈسکشن اراؤنڈ اٹ. تھینک یو ویری مچ جی.
تھینک یو ویری نائس پریزنٹیشن. اور باقی ریفارم اصل میں جو آپ 88 آنورڈ اگر دیکھیں تو ہماری سب سے بڑی ریفارم صرف IMF پروگرام ہے. IMF پروگرام مینس گیونگ مور پاور ٹو دا منسٹری آف فائنانس اور کیو بلاک. میں اور نوید دونوں اس کا پارٹ اینڈ پارسل رہے ہیں کہ ہم نے کس طرح بیڑا گرک کیا ریفارم کے انیشیٹیوز کا. تو میرا خیال ہے کہ یہ وقت کے ساتھ ساتھ اب ہمیں اس سے نکلنا پڑے گا کہ براڈننگ آف ٹیکس بیس اور the rationalization of expenditure, eliminating unproductive subsidies, یہ نیریٹیو جو ہے وہ اسٹیٹ آن انٹرپرائزز کے ریفارمس. سو وی آر ہیڈنگ ٹورڈس another IMF program in this year, I think, اور it is probably in September, October تک. تو اگین وہی ریفارم کا تو منسٹری آف فائنانس میں جب جا کے چیزیں اکٹھی ہو جاتی ہیں تو یہ فسکل ایک طرح کا سب سروینٹ ہو جاتی ہے ساری پالیسیز, ویدر اٹ از مانیٹری پالیسی اور ٹریڈ پالیسی. سو دس از انفارچونیٹ تھنگ. اینڈ وی ہیو اے ریفارم پروگرام ان دی پلاننگ کمیشن, بٹ ایٹ دا سیم ٹائم وی ہیو اکنامک ریفارم یونٹ ان دی منسٹری آف فائنانس. سو فلور از اوپن. اینی باڈی وانٹ ٹو ٹیک ask question, comment, but be brief to provide opportunity to others.
How do you link it with the our basically again second mentor's contribution in the planning commission framework of economic growth? How do you link this with that?
I think and of course I must also thank Ali Saab for providing this initiative. He of course came back to me at a very early stage کہ جی ہمیں اس قسم کی ڈسکشن اوپن کرنی چاہیے. سو تھینک یو ویری مچ. آئی تھنک جو فریم ورک فار اکنامک گروتھ آیا تھا 2011 میں وہ اس لیے اہم تھا کیونکہ اسی سال 18ویں ترمیم ہوئی تھی. اور اس وقت ڈاکٹر ندیم الحق صاحب نے کلیئرلی آئیڈینٹیفائی کیا تھا کہ جی آپ ہمیں تو بتائیں کہ ایک ڈپٹی چیئرمین پلاننگ کمیشن جو ہے وہ گائیڈنس مانگ رہا ہے کہ آپ ہمیں تو بتائیں کہ اس کے بعد فار ایگزامپل ہم نے اپنے فنکشن کو ریفارم کس طریقے سے کرنا ہے. تو میں اسی طرف ہنٹ کر رہا ہوں کہ وہ گائیڈنس جو ہے وہ ابھی بھی ایک انفنشڈ ایجنڈا ہے. وہ ابھی بھی کسی کو طے کرنا ہے, چاہے وہ پارلیمنٹ طے کرے, چاہے وہ ایک ورکنگ گروپ بنا دے, ایک ایمیننٹ پرسنس کی کمیٹی بنا دے. بٹ somebody needs to decide کہ what is the new planning function, what is the new planning model in this country basically. مطلب آئی ورک ود پلاننگ کمیشن جی. میں اس وقت 2 ورکنگ گروپس میں تھا 11th 5-year پلان. جی یس پلیز certainly my apologies. So I was in two working groups جی. One was the 11th 5-year plan at the federal level. There was a second Balochistan development plan which the provincial planning department in Quetta was making, you know. And I could see there was so much room if both start to talk each other, you know. But there is no law that binds us that Balochistan P&D division has to talk with the Federal Planning Commission, you know. The law may be there, dumped somewhere. It hasn't got the clarity. We need to interpret those laws better, you know. Or if there is an absence post 18th Amendment, we need to define.
Dr. Saab, is it not a lack of initiative by the Planning Commission? They are not going to organize some consultative forum with the provinces. Kis ne hame roka hai? Nobody is restricting us, Planning Commission, to take initiative.
But I think there are practical difficulties if you are inviting provincial government too often, because there are various forums, CDWP, or after every 15 days or once a month you invite all provinces. So I think there are frequent interaction, but only on projects, not on the reforms or any policy or program. So any other comments or maybe?
No, Dr. Obviously, I think it's a wonderful presentation, and this is the right time that we should discuss these issues as we are moving towards the next, hopefully, the next democratic government. And so I'll just share with you the thing that you mentioned, the disconnect between provinces and the federal government. I was sitting with the secretary of the planning department of a province, and the secretary asked me that does planning commission still make 5-year plans? So I'm not talking here, how effective is planning commission, this 5-year plan in provinces. The secretary even isn't aware whether planning commission is still developing the plan or not. So that is current, disconnect at this particular moment. So obviously you address that, and I think this is a good suggestion that this is time to move towards CCI. That's obviously that would improve, coordination. But on the second, and that I think wasn't addressed, you highlighted the disconnect between commerce and planning, other agencies. The issue is, even at the moment, the way planning is being done in the ministries, they are directly getting direction from the Prime Minister office. Like if Water and Power is working on energy initiatives, you mentioned about generation, whatever they are doing, they get that direct guidance from the Prime Minister anyhow, and Prime Minister asks them to do these projects, and then they develop PC1 and bring to the Planning Commission that we have decided it. Where was it decided? It was decided by the Prime Minister at some point of time. So that is what currently is happening. So is Planning Commission not realizing the way federal government is planning at the moment? Or, is there any, effort that how can we transform Planning Commission's role in this atmosphere? Because the original idea of 60s or 70s was obviously that all planning would route through Planning Commission. No, it's not routing even, Even the directions are not passing through central ministries like finance or planning. Those directions go directly, and then they just come to these ministries to formalize these things. So in this scenario, I don't know whether this is good or a bad practice, but whatever it is, it calls for a change of role of Planning Commission actually. So what's your say about within the even federal government that the role that Planning Commission will have to play, or whether we need to stop Prime Minister to give direct directions, or we need to redefine our role as a Planning Commission?
I would like to say that you have very much rightly diagnosed that regulators, planners, and the third one? Accountability, they are not communicating with each other. You are very much right. The basic issue is that overall structure of bureaucracy, that is the administrative ministry. In our rule of business says that the administrative ministry. This is not a deliverance ministry. This is the issue. Unless and until we doesn't address that aspect, the problem will remain there. I have my own thoughts on this issue. I can share it with you separately. But as far as CCI is concerned, in my opinion, it is a face-saving organization to address the political economy of the country. So putting Planning Commission as such a professional organization with the CCI may not serve the purpose. We had to address the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission should also be mentally prepared to devolve something to the land ministries, because in the way we are working, that is not good for others, for the ministries, for the provinces. We are a forum which clears the projects. They don't see us as a planner, so these are the issues. In energy sector, we organize few of seminars and meetings, and in those meetings we invited OGRA and NEPRA, and they were very much forthcoming. We didn't see any reluctance to participate from those organizations. There was some issue on, there was some proposal that, as Dr. Ashratul Ibad has proposed, and the State Bank Governor, the Ashrat Hussain, the executive, there was a proposal to create an exclusive cadre of economics, because the people from the Pakistani administrative services and the police used to say these are the services which integrate the Pakistan. They used to claim whether they are right or wrong. But on economic front, we don't have such a cadre who can say that we integrate, because the issues travel from district to province, province to federation. But the exposure the people in planning commission is having, they are even planning commission itself need a reform.
Absolutely.
So even a person sitting, say if I am working in the energy side, a person sitting in the OGRA, a person sitting in NEPRA or in energy in the planning commission or in Ministry of Water doing the same job.
Absolutely.
Why they cannot horizontally move? Same is the provincial energy department. We on the CFR forum, which you help a lot in this respect to planning commission. We had a consultative meeting in the provinces. I was surprised. They are having very good ideas. Even I was not aware that Balochistan is having the issue of if they are go for solar, they don't have the access to transmission system to evacuate the power. In GB and AJK, we were surprised to see that they are having the main source of the renewable energy, but they cannot evacuate if the power is generated through the small or medium hydel project. So these are the issues.
Sir, इसमें मैं थोड़ा सा ऐड करता चलूँ. This is exactly what I am referring to. That somebody has to do the reform. Somebody has to bell the cat, you know.
Yeah.
So, which institution in the whole ecosystem? If not planning commission, and Zafar Saab says that finance takes it away, okay, then let finance take it. Is it performing that function? You see, they have an economic reform unit, as you rightly said, you know. So let it perform. I'm hinting towards a vacuum. I'm literally hinting towards a vacuum that nobody is pulling together the economic reform. Every ministry has a reform line item of its own, and that lined reform has an overlap with a different ministry, and nobody is clearly understanding where that overlap comes. So the Venn diagram just breaks out, you know. And I still remember accompanying a deputy chairman planning commission to Q Block, finance minister's office, and of course Ali Kamal Saab has already hinted who that deputy chairman was, and that deputy chairman presents the whole economic reform plan after a planning wide exercise of 2.5 years, and the finance minister asks him, why don't you focus on your own role? Your role is PSDP. And then the deputy chairman asks the finance minister, then who's responsible for reform in the system? Energy reform, agriculture reform, industrial reform. Where is it? The Ministry of Food Security has barely got money for salaries, you know. They won't talk about reform. They don't have the capacity. They may have the capacity, of course, but they're not configured under the rules of business that way. So reform has to be a body that can sit together, visualize the next 50 years and envisage something, you know. Abhi sir, aapne usubon ki baat ki, and you're extremely right. In case of the energy sector, energy theft is an issue where federal needs provinces. Provinces have to go out.
Without provincialization of the distribution system, हमारा जो line
losses,
because that is a political issue, law and order issue.
Absolutely. So sir, I want to go back to what Mr. AG and Qazi used to do. If you go back to his system, and he was one of the longest deputy chairmen of Planning Commission, when he was entrusted in this position, he said that I will only take this position if all federal secretaries are given KPIs by my ministry, which is Planning Commission. And all federal secretaries were given KPIs by AG and Qazi Saab, and he used to monitor those KPIs. This system has prevailed in Pakistan for 11 years that he was deputy chairman. And 3 governments didn't change him. They allowed him to remain. You see, because he was delivering. Planning Commission was delivering, you know. So unless you give the civil service a KPI and then somebody like AG and Qazi Saab monitors those KPIs. Please, sir.
Firstly, let me explain why a foreigner is in the room. I head UNICEF's office in Punjab, public finance management, obviously very closely associated with the 18th Amendment, has an immediate impact on the opportunities for the development and the protection of children. Hence, this subject is very important in Punjab and indeed in Pakistan. Your last slide, or the last two slides, were perhaps related to the comment that you've just made, and I thought that could have been given a little bit more attention. The idea of the reporting and the accountability. The reason why I say this is that possibly with a greater reporting and accountability, the demand for institutional reform has an immediate purpose. It's not for creating a bureaucracy or a power structure, but it is in order to address the issues that are arising through the reporting and the accountability through the structures and institutions that do exist. The government of Punjab is on the cusp of making progress in this regard, and it is in everybody's interests to make progress there. But the emphasis on KPIs, or more than KPIs, it's a more robust reporting and accountability, will surely support an appropriate institutional development in the context of the 18th Amendment.
Absolutely.
So, you want to respond or?
Dr. Sahib, how are you?
Doctor's excellent presentation, but mine is just a comment, or just this, I want to express myself, which I observed from this presentation. It's basically highlighted as the growth linked with 18th Amendment, as Ali highlighted about the growth aspect. So I just want to say that isn't there a need to reconsider the allocation mechanism under upcoming NFC for having improved growth patterns such as the bottom-up approach, which China and Indonesia have. So I think there is lacunas and issues in the in NFCs, and we should raise or highlight these issues, being having good allocation for having positive impact on our economic growth.
And I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And the devolution process isn't complete without the reform of NFC, you know. And sorry, please.
Your presentation is mostly focused on governance
Yes,
issue,
yes.
and that is also very important. As you mentioned, the 36% or something around, we used to have wastage or leakages. So by coping all these negative impacts and wastages, why not we should basically look at the allocation mechanism, which is very important to look at, especially for upcoming new NFC,
Absolutely.
for having a major impact on our economic growth.
And let me take you a step further, you know. 18th Amendment, of course, and the fiscal centralization that accompanied, that had to give powers to the provinces, and these provinces had to give certain power to the districts.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened, you see.
Okay.
So that is number one. Number two, there is a group of economists very interested to work on the idea that if provinces are not willing to give powers to the districts themselves, can we redesign the revenue side of NFC so that somehow the federation structure, the way we distribute our revenue, can empower the districts? For example, in just a hypothetical example, of course, I don't know why the cameras are here, but so let's suppose federation takes income tax, if it can sustain the federation, income and corporate tax. Provincial government takes GST on services, and let the GST on goods go to the districts. Your district administration will become self-sufficient. They will in fact challenge the provincial governments. So you can readily empower them by rethinking the NFC's financing side, you know. Give them a taxation regime, a taxation stream, for example, like you have given provincial government.
So this is
There would be some capacity issues.
Yes.
Because there is a Provincial Finance Commission. Asian Development Bank supported a decentralization support program. Under that, different reform model was developed. One of them is the Provincial Finance Commission. Province is not ready to delegate the power to the districts. So there is also issue of capacity also. People want to demand but don't want to take some responsibility. So it is very much complex issue. If we, through economics, we cannot address the governance issues, and through governance, we cannot address the economic issues. So
They are highly linked with each
there is
other.
highly linked.
But I
so-
think,
Another aspect is that provinces are not eager or appetite toward generating their own revenue. For example, Punjab is getting almost 80% fiscal transfers. So there doesn't have any hope.
I am personally of the opinion, Dr. Saab, in the Pakistan economy is not damaged due to the corruption. जो हम उर्दू में कहते हैं ना सेना जोरी, that is the main reason of the weak economy, because people in city of Fata is not ready to pay the electricity bill. People in Balochistan is not ready to pay the tube well bills. People in Gilgit-Baltistan or in AJK, where per capita administrative cost is very much high, they are not ready to pay the income tax. Then where we will meet the expenditure? So the political psychology which has been established in Pakistan or get some roots due to nationalist parties, those fallout is also to be addressed. That is also linked.
Absolutely.
okay, Hamid,
What's up, I'm literally confused. I would like to make a statement. Talking about all the reforms, NFC, provincial power, forget about those reforms. There needs to be another reform before that, that is bureaucratic reform. Even if you delegate the powers at district level, they are controlled by someone. I would like to give you one example. There was recently a 300 million fund released to some constituency, okay? We asked for a list of projects. And XCN was calling me and said, which are the projects? Do you have the projects or not? I'm asking you, which are the projects? Which M&A is behind this? So these are one of the leakages. So I'm saying the posting, transfers, the linkage between bureaucracy. How do you solve that? Forget about them being delegating the powers. And secondly, regarding the capacity issue, 18th Amendment is an excellent concept. But before doing that, kindly build the concept of provinces. Still, there is a summary in the CCI that is impending, and CCI, they are asking, the provinces are asking for to extend the projects, which we asked them or requested them that you will have to take it over. Are they taking it over? No. They are asking the federal governments to control us, to finance these projects. So these are some of the issues, and Dr. Saab, I would like to ask you, can you explain the concept of planning budgeting? I've been reading your book, because everyone over here, they would like to have a history of that related to planning budgeting.
So I think your point is important, Hamid Saab. I totally agree with you. Thankfully, I am one of those who believes that we have strong institutions. Unlike many people in this country, I'm of course grateful to people who came before us. Our institutions or the legal foundations of those institutions are very strong. I mean, you go to countries like Nepal, for example, where for 3 years Supreme Court was running the country. I don't know, a dozen prime ministers had changed, for example. You go to Maldives, you go to the Middle East, the countries are in literally. So we are amongst countries which have strong institutions. I'm one of those who believes that. It's just a reform process which needs to be a continuous thing. It can only be a continuous thing if somebody is a custodian of that reform. That's number one. Your number 2 point is extremely important. The civil service reform agenda. As we used to call it in the framework for economic growth as well. When this government came, one of the first committees it made under Khwaja Zahir and Mr. Ehsan Iqbal was a civil service reform committee. And the committee only met once. It gave such good recommendations regarding FPSC, reform of PCSCs. It is an open question in the House, where did those recommendations go? Because this was a high-powered committee, as high-powered as it could get, you know. Khwaja Saab was sitting in the Prime Minister's Secretariat, Ehsan Saab was Minister for Reform, you know. On planning and budgeting, Hamid Saab, very simple concept. Unless somebody is pulling together the reform, plans will not be aligned to budgets. So, जो Zafar Saab ने बात की, he's absolutely right. If finance ministry, if definition of reform is federal budget, then of course finance ministry has a capture, you see, and then the connect between planning and budgeting goes. If you have to implement the SDGs agenda, Sustainable Development Goals, one of the core requirements is alignment between plans and budgets at all levels, federal, provincial, sub-provincial, That's how you can move towards localization of SDGs. Doctor.
Samila sir, working here as Young Development Fellow. Basically, I'm from Balochistan, Shaman Balochistan. So we have a major trade gap with Afghanistan and Iran via Taftan and Shaman border. But we see, sir, a trade in the form of illicit trade, we are smuggling, so we can call it a huge sum of money exchanged through smuggling, and such such problem provide the forum like FATF to blame our state for financing terrorism and other things. Although custom, FIA and the boys are there to monitor directly, monitoring border directly, but sir, they remain failed to stop smuggling. And if we provide opportunity to the local traders by providing incentives in the form of lowering tax, so I think the people might divert toward engaging in smuggling and will trade in the proper manner.
Absolutely.
One question. So second is why the government remain fail for accountability. Tries the Department Custom, FIA and the Army, sir. They are directly monitoring the border. How can we prevent such a menace? And after 18 amendments, sir, is it the responsibility of the federal government or the provincial government to stop such a problem like I call it smuggling?
So I think given that Afghanistan was one of our largest trading partners prior to 2013 and somehow the exports have come down, it is a very important question, But the good thing is, in fact, three things. Number one, we have started fencing the border. Of course, it's going to take time. It's a long border. But a lot of those things which you are saying, they will be stopped, or at least partially curtailed. Number two, NLC and the provincial government and the federal government are now implementing what they call integrated customs interchange, just like they have with India on Wagah-Atari border. You see, how do they stop smuggling? You have a container the size of literally this corridor. The entire truck goes inside. You don't open the truck. The smuggling takes place or demurrage takes place when you start opening the truck and reloading it on another truck, So now on Chaman, they have approved it, and NLC will be implementing that, Then, of course, the third aspect is the question of morality, which will, of course, remain.
My name is Dr. Abdul. I'm representing NUST, Department of Economics. Dr. Sabai, just wanted to comment about, you talked about reforms and some of the suggestions you made towards the end that certain taxes should go to the district government are very interesting. But I wanted to talk about the quality of reforms. So recently what happened was that I was in Lahore, and there is this lot of press for the digitization of land records that is going on from getting help from the World Bank. So I had to visit the place which gives digital records. So I asked them, I said, how do you guys make an assessment of what piece of land belongs to whom? So my understanding was that somebody is doing some kind of a, what is called a geo tagging. So they said, we don't do that. We just get the fard from the patwari. So, it's one thing, talking about reforms, and it's another subject or discipline talking about the quality of reforms. It seems to me that in this country we have become a little addicted to this idea of institutional reform, because obviously there is a gravy train attached to institutional reform. So I think when people talk about institutional reforms, they must also focus on the quality of reforms that are going on. And I'd like to just hear what you have to say about this.
No, absolutely,
Last question related to
Ji, please.
So, Ji, Nadeem sir.
Thank you, Dr. Waqar, very enlightened presentation. I have a very simple question. How do you place the provincial autonomy in the structure of your reforms? Because when we look at the devolution plan of 2011. It was the demand of the provinces for so long that we need such kind of reforms under the constitution. And when we talk about the governing body, do you think that we kill the intent of the devolution and provincial wouldn't get such kind of provincial autonomy that they desire to have?
Are you talking about Council of Common Interest? Dr. Saab, on the quality of reform, absolutely. I mean, I cannot agree more with it, you know. But let me take a more sort of a myopic view, unfortunately, you know, and say that we first need to sort of start talking about it, you know. So if, for example, geotagging is now taking place at least in 2 pilot districts after 70 years, we should sort of see that as a plus. Otherwise, you're right, वो फर्दी चलती थी, खद्दर के ऊपर वो सारी लिखा जाता था वो सारा. So you're right, and this is what I'm saying, that it's not that we don't have legislation. It's just that the regulations to explain the legislation are missing, you know, and that's your point as well, the quality versus quantity part. We have pieces of legislation. It's the way it is, how richly it is interpreted, how broadly it is interpreted, you know. I really appreciate this point, you know. And then Nadeem Saab again, you know, I would have thought that CCI can only weaken this spirit if, for example, provinces hadn't approved of it. If, for example, provinces are sitting in CCI and provinces are able to veto anything, you don't need a majority vote. If one province vetoes, that's it. The agenda is down. So even if the smallest province vetoes, you know. So I would be the one who actually appreciates this model amid, of course, all these efficiency constraints which CCI has. I mean, if Prime Minister has to head it and Prime Minister hasn't got the time to even go to the Senate or National Assembly, how will he convene CCI? Questions like this keep on coming to my mind. But the architects of 18th Amendment had given a lot of thought to this. They had studied, you know, models in dozens of countries before forming the council. The representation is very powerful, as I said. The smallest province can veto anything in CCI. So let's now, I mean, the way I can take your question forward is that what could be the future models of CCI? Just like I'm posing the question regarding the planning function. What could be the future model of planning in this country, you know? So it is a very interesting debate, and we need to start talking about it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vikas, for coming
Thank you, sir.
to your home. So Planning Commission is your home. And thank you everybody for joining us for this important debate. I think we need to debate reform more often. So our platform is open if anybody likes to deliver something. So we have this series of social sector seminars. This is normally fortnightly. So today I think there is some sort of mismanagement because of CDWP, because projects are more important than anything else. This is the problem of
That's
the
planning commission's core function, obviously.
So because we have to work like a project
कोई कहे तो
commission.
बुरा लगता है.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.